don't get it, but I'm willing to bet you that if you go through and look at how many thousands and thousands of times families have wanted their young daughter to marry a rich man, the numbers I'm sure are countless, right? And so maybe that's their mindset. I don't think it's okay. I wouldn't do it, but it's kind of crazy, right? So, but here's the interesting thing: most black people didn't care either, because if they cared, they would have
I
done
did
something about it.
care,
They,
and I didn't do anything about it.
but people, right? Exactly. Yeah,
Because
people.
I myself was what 19, 20 years old
Yeah. Well,
when
when
this was
things came
happening.
to a head was when R. Kelly was on that tape, and that was when
Oh,
it
when he
was.
was peeing on that little girl.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that to me was like, okay, so this is the evidence. This is the smoking gun, just like Diddy beating up Cassie on tape. This is the smoking gun. And let me tell you, I watched that whole situation very carefully. So here's what I noticed. Number one, when R. Kelly went on to BET, BET stood by him very, very deeply. They were very close to R. Kelly.
Why?
Well, I think they had a business relationship. Again, it's money. So they had him on BET to help clear the air, and all R. Kelly kept saying in the interview was, "Focus, just focus on my music. Just focus on my music." And I know why, because he knows that if you just focus on his music and his talent and the fact that he's popular and sexy or whatever you think he is, that people are just going to ignore it. Because remember, R. Kelly had a lot of friends. Diddy had a lot of friends. And what's funny is we isolate one person and don't act like they didn't have 50 friends doing the same thing, right? So it's kind of like a ridiculous sort of it's kind of a ridiculous circus in a way.
Hmm.
And so I remember when I was at Jesse Jackson's event in 2004 ish, and I went to the bathroom. I was standing next to this guy who was a program director at WGCI, I believe, on one of the major radio stations in Chicago.
Hmm.
And I said, "Are y'all going to keep not playing R. Kelly music?" And he said, "No." He said, "We're going to start playing it because he's so talented." And that's it. And because at first they had stopped playing it for like about, 2,
Hmm.
3 weeks. And then he's like, "No, but he's talented." And that's what happens. That's what people do.
So
And
they didn't care about him taking advantage of those black girls
I don't think they
in
did.
Chicago.
I don't think that they cared until they were forced to care. I don't.
Mm.
I think that people care when they feel like, oh, okay, I can't just let this slide. Like I think Howard, if you went back 10 years, I think Howard, people at Howard knew the complications that came with a close affiliation with Diddy, but they felt the good outweighed the bad. It's not like people have the courage to define their own ethical code that's independent of what
They
other
just
people think.
go along. They're not thinking. They just go along with whatever media tells them.
People go along with whatever's popular, and
Hmm.
that's the reality. Studies show that 70% of all people
Hmm.
follow the crowd, even if the crowd is wrong.
Yeah, and so if you're the kind of person that upsets the apple cart, then you get labeled as difficult, and nobody wants to deal with you, even though
Mm.
you're the one like calling out things that are legitimately like wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And
Hmm.
I mean, generally speaking, and I think about Dr. Claude Anderson when I think about this.
Hmm.
If you're a person that presents independent ideas that are radically different from what people think, you
Hmm.
need to have your own independent economic base to support you in those situations.
Hmm.
You're not going to get a lot of institutional support, and it's very unfortunate. So I think that the lack of economic connection that black institutions have with the black community
Right.
is what drives their inability to really pursue meaningful change. Because if you are economically independent, you can say, "Yeah, I know that it's popular to go this way, but we're going to make the unpopular choice." And really, that's what.
To drive the culture.
Right, to yeah,
Hmm.
instead of being a product of my environment, I believe that my environment can be a product of me. And that takes a lot of courage to do. Most people can't do that. Most people just go along with whatever everybody else is doing and what everybody else thinks is cool.
Hmm.
And I don't think that's how progress gets made.
So people are, I guess we want to say people are strategic.
Hmm.
They're strategic about what, okay, so we got this issue going on, but we do have the money coming in, but we have popular opinion thinking this way. So I think people just sit in this room and just kind of strategize on how we're going to proceed.
Yeah, people want to know which way the wind is blowing.
Yeah. They don't want
Yeah.
to be the one to be a cavalier.
Yeah, it's really hard to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
you really to do that. I mean, to really pursue this thing, I mean, black people, we talk all day about freedom and everything else.
Hmm.
And I don't think a lot of us even know what freedom really looks like. Freedom requires courage and sacrifice. Freedom requires
Oh yeah.
being ostracized, being beat up a little bit, and most people can't take that.
I mean, that's what marriage requires that.
What marriage?
Marriage requires sacrifice.
It does,
You can't
absolutely,
just think about yourself. You have to think about your family.
for sure. Yeah,
That's this institution.
yeah, discipline and commitment,
Discipline
and
and commitment.
until we breed, until we create disciplined,
It's
committed
grown up
institutions
behavior.
that create disciplined, committed
Hmm.
graduates, we will never have a community that's really got the freedom we deserve. I mean,
Hmm.
I kind of feel like I love Howard. I think it's a great school in a lot of ways. But when it comes to really navigating the kind of change that's going to really radically transform the outcomes for the Black community, it's not going to come from an HBCU. Because they can't even pay their own bills. A man who can't pay his own bills can never truly be a man. An
Hmm.
institution that can't pay its own bills can never truly transform society.
Hmm.
You're gonna pretty
You're
much,
always beholden to something.
yeah. Pinocchio will never be a real boy, and a lot of times, and this is I think what happens with Diddy and a lot of rappers in general is, they are controlled by the industry and the people that pay the bills. And
Hmm.
then they start to believe their own hype. They start to, when they go out and call themselves bosses and kings and all that, and then they start to behave that way and start to go in their own independent direction. Then they get sort of reminded,
Yeah, but he wasn't acting like a grown up. Like there's nothing mature about him.
yeah,
It's the maturity. I think the problem that I have, just as I'm thinking about how marriage takes commitment and you have to grow up. It is a growth process
mm,
to be married. You can't act as a child thinking about yourself.
true,
And I think that this immature behavior is what's really part of the reason why Black men and women aren't getting together and getting married. They're so
mm,
absorbed into their own thing that they can't even think past themselves onto another person.
that's true.
And I mean, where's the growth in that? Just thinking about you,
Mm.
another person that you could make that commitment to and foster love and affection with.